James Glass, thanks very much for coming on the Rebel Agent podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's great to get you on because I think it's becoming more and more obvious to agencies that they need good training now.
Some of them, yes. Others, we're working on it.
Yeah, sure. But you've got a fantastic reputation. So I'm looking forward to discussing that and other things, but maybe you'd like to introduce yourself first.
Sure, yeah, thanks. Me too. Look, what's the story? Basically, I'm French-American. I'm confused. I was born and raised in France, American parents, so I'm very American outside, but actually I'm kind of European inside. I try to take the best of both worlds. Ended up out here back in 2016, so it's been almost a decade that I've been here. Originally came out with Emirates, like I think probably some people who are watching or listening to this, as cabin crew. And then after 3 years of doing that, ended up accidentally in the world of real estate. Ended up at Property Finder as our training manager with a pretty steep learning curve. That was pre-COVID days. And that's really where I kind of learned the whole world of real estate. I'd done some sales in the past, but real estate was a whole new realm to me, especially here. And so then that was kind of my entrance, not only into real estate, but also into training, right? That was my first time training. So a very steep learning curve. But what I was telling you earlier is that was really good exposure for me, because during my time at Property Finder, I probably went to like 300 different brokerages here in Dubai and trained their teams, right? Trained their brokers, their admins, even the owners of the companies on how to use that platform, on how to maximize the algorithm, how to create a good listing, how to qualify leads. And so that was really good exposure, built a really good network. And it's kind of essentially, fast forward 6-7 years later, what has kind of launched me into where I'm at today and what we're going to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, it happens by accident, doesn't it? And a lot of people have taken that path. But I'd like to go back a little bit further. Mm-hmm. You've got a background in basketball, is that right?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if I call it a background, but yes, I played basketball. Yeah, so growing up, I'm tall.
Yeah.
And so everyone was always telling me I should play basketball. I actually grew up playing ice hockey as a kid, and that was kind of my passion. But ended up picking up basketball quite late. I only started playing basketball when I was 11, again, back in France. And it went well. I kind of picked it up pretty quickly. And long story short, I found out quite late I think I was like 14 when I found out I could get paid to play a sport in university in the States. I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. I want to get a free education playing basketball. And so that's kind of what I worked toward. Ended up moving to LA for a couple of years in high school because it's much easier to get recruited to play a sport if you're living in the US than if you're living overseas. And so I was there for 2 years and I was 16, 17. And again, that was a lot of what shaped me, is moving away when you're 16 years old from home and living with a host family 8,000 miles away. It kind of shapes a lot of how you see the world and how
you were with a host family, were you?
Correct, yeah. Yeah. So
in Chicago?
In LA. So 2 years in LA in high school, and then ended up getting a scholarship. So it worked out. Ended up getting a scholarship to play basketball in Chicago for 4 years. So
that's fantastic.
So yeah, a background, if you will. But yeah, I did play sports. And then when I graduated, actually, so I was the only player of the 5 starters on my college basketball team that didn't end up playing professional basketball somewhere at any kind of level. And that was kind of an intentional decision. I was good, but I wasn't that good. And I knew that. It's okay, a little humility sometimes. I wasn't going to go to the league. And so, I just kind of made a decision that I would kind of end my basketball career there, if you will, and kind of get into the world. And so that's what led me out to Dubai. I wanted to come and travel the world and live in the Middle East. So
but playing sport to that high standard and being involved with sport teaches you a lot about life, doesn't it?
For sure.
That interaction with the other players. And I think it prepares you extremely well.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, those 4 years, especially my last 2 years. Level. Yeah. And how people underestimate what a sports coach can do to young adults, especially, right? Like in your university years, between that age of like 16 to 22, having a really good coach or a team of coaches that's like forming you and teaching you things like work ethic and discipline and showing up on time, and how, like mentality influences and impacts your actual ability to perform in any area of life. Those things are lessons that you keep for the rest of your life. And so, yeah, sports was massively impactful for me and shaped kind of who I am and how I think.
Sports coaching and real estate coaching.
Well, yeah, here we are, right? I guess it impacted me more than I think. Here I am trying to coach and train other people. So yeah.
Great. So then you got the position with Emirates, which you did for a number of years.
Correct.
And from Emirates, you went to Property Finder. You were mentioning earlier how that transition happened.
Yeah. So basically, it's a long story, which we won't get into now for the sake of our poor viewers. But basically, I met a guy on a plane back in 2016 when I was coming to Dubai. I was sat next to a guy named Alex. And at the time, we started chatting. We chat for like 7 hours on the flight, got along great. And then turns out he was coming to Dubai to join Property Finder. as I think the COO or something. And so
which
we
is the main property portal here.
Correct,
in Dubai.
which is the number one portal. It's kind of like the Zillow of the US or the Rightmove of the UK. You got Property Finder here. And so he was joining Property Finder. Again, this was before my real estate days, so I didn't really know much about Property Finder. So I came here 3 years, didn't talk to the guy. And then when I was kind of getting married and leaving Emirates, I was looking for a role. And I remember this guy, Alex, that I'd met. It's all about the network in life, right? And so I emailed him, and long story short, they brought me in for an interview. So again, it was because of that whole transition from Emirates into Property Finder, accidentally, if you will, literally because I met a guy on a plane that led me to, kind of doing what I do today full time in the real estate sector.
Yeah, fantastic. And that prepared you very well to move on to your next training role, which was at Hast House.
Correct. So from Property Finder, I didn't tell you this, I did a short little stint in fintech after Property Finder because COVID, right? For those of the viewers who were here kind of all the way through COVID in Dubai, it's a bit of a weird time, right? And there was a lot of people that kind of ended up in roles that they probably wouldn't have thought they would be in because we wanted to stay in Dubai. And so I ended up in fintech for a little while, which was interesting, up in DIFC, which is kind of one of my other passions. And then from there, I ended up back at Hast House because I had that real estate background. The market was kind of good again after COVID, and a lot of these brokerages that had survived that COVID time in Dubai were now growing and scaling and doing quite well. And so they were at Hast House. They'd done a really good job of kind of like building the structure with those 3 directors. I know you had Luke in here on the podcast. And I think they were just kind of trying to grow and scale with the right key people to be able to take the workload off of them 3, which is good. And so they brought me in to kind of help them take over their training program that they had built and kind of reshape that and try to improve it a little bit. And so that's what I did for a year. And then I ended up getting poached, which is very common in the industry, to Axe Capital, where I was for a couple of years as the director of learning and development. So that's kind of been the journey.
So at Hast House, how much of the program did you put in place yourself, and how much was it existing?
Yeah, good question. So the structure of the program existed. Obviously, James, Luke, and Simon, they had 10, 15 years of experience on me in real estate. So they had built the main structure as far as like the content, but none of them, and this is very common in the industry, right? They aren't training professionals, right? They've never studied training. They've never been trainers. And so a lot of it is taking the existing content. And even today, right? Like I tell my clients all the time, different real estate brokerages, I don't have some silver bullet. I'm not coming in saying, I know something about real estate none of you know. No, that's not the case, right? Like there are many people who've been here longer who know real estate better than I do. What I know is how to take information that's in the room, right? Like let's extract knowledge, expertise, and experience from people in the room. From a room of
facilitating.
10, 20, 30, 50 brokers. There's a lot of knowledge in there, more than I have, right? Let me be the person that comes in and extracts that knowledge and then shares that knowledge in a digestible, fun, interactive way so everyone can leave better at their jobs, right? And so that's kind of the approach that I always take in any role is, hey, how can I take the existing program and then take the existing knowledge and just make it a more fun, more dynamic environment, and even digitizing some of that, right? That's a big part that I did that had never been done before.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of Hast House. As you say, I've had Luke Remington on, but Paul Sharland and Stephen Leckie as well. Right. And I've got more Hast House guests lined up. So I think what they've done is a great example to a number of people.
It is. Yep. I only ever speak well of them. They've done a great job. And like I was telling you earlier, it's amazing to see a brokerage where there's 3 equal founders of a company that, 15 years later still get along, right? Usually that's like an explosive formula. But I think them 3 are really humble. They've worked really hard and they've made it work together. So I only ever speak well of Hast House and my time there. They were very good.
I think I saw Luke on one of his podcasts and he said, we've never really had an argument.
Yeah,
which
amazing.
Is, as you say, that is remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there would have been intense situations and they've handled it really well.
Yeah.
So Axe Capital approached you.
They did, yeah.
Having said all those positive things about Hast House, but presumably they
Well, look, Axe Capital was a really exciting journey for me, and I'm very thankful that I made that decision. So essentially, very much so the opposite, one guy in charge, right? Which has its benefits, is that you can move very quickly, you make big decisions, you can take big risks because it only impacts yourself. So in that way, it's a good thing. Essentially they contacted me. At the time when I joined Axe Capital, I think they were around 150 employees, something like that, maybe around 120 brokers. And then by the time I left, 2 years and 1 day later, we were at around 1,000 employees, about 650, 700 brokers, about 850 employees based in Dubai. So I mean, in the span of 24 months to grow a company at that speed is obviously impressive. It's fun. It's exciting. It comes with a lot of dangers, a lot of challenges to overcome. Some of them that we did a good job with, others that we did not do such a good job with, right? That comes with a lot of challenges. But yeah, it was a really fun journey.
How did you grow so quickly? Obviously the training is, very much part of that. But.
I mean, look, we had a whole separate office just for recruitment and training, right? So that tells you how seriously we were taking those two sectors within the company. And that really is how you grow a company, right? It's a really good recruitment team that is then driving people not into an abyss, but into a program that's going to help them then over the first. Really, we started off with a 1-week program, turned that into a 2-week program, and then turned that in, really, by the time I left, into a 6-week program where we're kind of staying with those brokers all the way through 6 weeks. So if you're able to give brokers that good structure over the first 6 weeks, then that's going to allow more brokers to be able to come through that program.
Is that 6 weeks in the classroom? Or
no. So we were doing 2 weeks. Again, that's probably very different now, but by the time I left, we had 2 weeks in the classroom, if you will. But the way we structured it is that we realized people have very short attention spans, especially salespeople, right? So we would do actually just mornings. So 2 weeks of, let's say, 3.5, 4-hour mornings of training in the classroom. And that's where having what we call an LMS, a learning management system, or an LXP, which is a platform to host your digital training, right? That's where we would have complimentary training for them to do on their own time in the afternoon that would kind of build on the morning session and prepare them for the next morning session. Also giving them assignments, things to do, maybe going to their areas for the secondary brokers, learning a project for the off-plan brokers, so that again, by the end of those 2 weeks, they would have had time with their teams, time with their managers, classroom training, digital training, and would have learned their area or projects by the end of it. And so that's kind of the formula that we saw was working. And so that's kind of what we built out, and it was quite good.
Yeah, that's really thorough.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you played an instrumental part, I presume, in putting that program together.
Well, I mean, there was no program.
You were head of training.
Yeah, correct. There was no program when I joined. It was just kind of like most other brokerages, sales directors doing their best, having no idea what they're doing, right? Again, they have the knowledge. Like I say, these sales directors are really good at real estate. They have the knowledge, but they don't know how to communicate that in a clear, concise, and comprehensive program. And so, yeah, essentially, I built a team, a program of
that length. Can I ask how many in the team?
Yeah, so by the time I left, there were 5 of us. So it was me, 3 other trainers under me, and then a full-time e-learning developer building out the whole online side of things. So, I mean, again, it takes an investment, right? Most companies think they have 1, maybe 2. I think the biggest brokerages have maybe 3 trainers, right? And so it really takes an investment. If you want to scale at that speed and keep it healthy, it just takes a lot of work and effort getting the right people into those positions. And there's not a whole lot of people out there in the training realm in Dubai real estate.
So when you've got 5 trainers, are you still doing some training yourself, but largely you'll be looking after those other trainers and checking on them, I guess?
Yeah, by the end of it, I was actually delivering very little. At the beginning, obviously, it was just me, right? So at the beginning, I was delivering a lot, and then finally got 1 trainer, finally got another, built out the online program. But really, by the end of my stint there, and this is what I say for anybody really in any role, especially in management roles, your objective should be to work yourself out of a job. If you do your job well as a manager, you should be able to build a structure and a team that is able to deliver all of their KPIs without you being involved. And so essentially within 2 years, that's kind of what I did. The team was self-functioning.
Job done.
Yeah, job done, right? Time to move on. And honestly, it was great. And so I resigned, and the training program kept going, and the trainers are there, and they promoted someone else to like a level below as a training manager, and the program is good. And so, without talking about Axe as a whole and some of the things that our viewers probably think or don't think based on rumors or whatnot. Some are true, some are not. But as far as the actual training program, it was a self-sustaining, very proficient training program. So it was good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So then you set up Glass Consulting, which is your own business.
Correct. Yeah. So I was a little bit burnt out. After that stint at Hast House.
You took it because you're very prominent on LinkedIn, and it's coming back to me now. I remember you said you had a bit of a timeout, didn't you?
Yeah. So my wife and I actually went to California for about a month, and then Mexico for I think 4 or 5 weeks, just to really get our minds off everything and leave. So it was great. It was the greatest couple months. Got super sick in Mexico. It was great. And then came back. And essentially what happened, LinkedIn, we can talk more about LinkedIn if you want. It might be interesting. I know you're very active on LinkedIn as well, and you can tell us a bit about your journey with that. But essentially the brand that I kind of built for myself on LinkedIn just by being active over a few years, when I left Axe, I wasn't very smart. I didn't think about it. But essentially I put on LinkedIn that I left Axe. And immediately, and everyone in real estate in Dubai resonates with this because it happens all the time. I think I had like 30 or 40 different brokerages reach out, like, oh, we're looking for someone like you. Like, okay, great, thank you. I'm not looking for a role.
I don't think 30 or 40 reach out to everyone, but
well, I mean, yeah, I think there's very unique roles like training. There's not many trainers, and a lot of brokerages are looking. So maybe it's a bit of a unique role.
It's very much a compliment, I think.
I appreciate it. Thanks. I'll take it. So, anyways, I ended up saying yes to all of them because, again, it's all about the network, right? And so, if there's one thing that you take away from watching or listening to this podcast is that it's all about the network in Dubai. And so I went and I met, I think, for like a month, just like a coffee every day with a different owner of a brokerage. And basically, and this isn't a diss on every brokerage in Dubai, maybe a little bit, but basically I sat there for half an hour without any exception. And I got talked at for half an hour about how their brokerage is the biggest and the best and the sexiest. And, you should join us because of all these reasons. I'm like, okay, good. At least you have self-confidence, right? And then, the question I always ask is, okay, how can I help? Like, what are your problems? You told me how amazing you are. It doesn't sound like you need me. Like, how can I help your company, right? And so they would list a few things that they think I might be able to help with. And what I realized over and over is I don't think you actually need me full time. I think I can probably help you with some of those items. Some of them I don't want to touch, right? But I can help you with some of those items by coming in and just helping you as a freelancer, as a consultant, whatever it is. And I didn't know how that was going to land. I thought I might just get asked to leave over and over and over. But actually, a large majority of these brokerages said, actually, that makes sense, right? It'll cost us less money. We don't need to hire someone full time, but we can still achieve the objectives that we're looking to achieve. And so that's kind of what got me thinking after I left Axe that I think there is actually space in the market for someone who does this full time. Your top 20 brokerages, they have their in-house trainers and their programs, and that's fine. And I have other programs and products that can help those training teams without me actually being there. But really, then there's that middle, 3,000 brokerages in Dubai,
we were discussing this, weren't we?
That don't have their full-time training
They can't
program.
necessarily afford a full-time
And they can't
trainer.
afford it. It doesn't make sense. They got 10, 20, 30 brokers. It doesn't make sense for them to have a full-time trainer. And so that's where they can bring me in, for a session a week, a session a month, 3 days in a row for an intense program, whatever it is, depending on the team, the structure, off-plan, secondary, commercial, whatever they're doing. And so that's kind of the niche that I've built, and it's going pretty well so far.
Yeah. And then you were talking earlier about, and you've touched on it actually in the podcast, about people not necessarily being great at training. They might be good as brokers, or they might be good brokers, but not necessarily good business people. Do you want to touch a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think I used the word epidemic earlier, or disease, did I? I think it's part of the industry. It's no one's fault per se. It's also the nature of I think the Middle East and the UAE, but usually, if you look at specifically the real estate sector, people that are working within real estate in non-full-time commission-only broker roles, we're thinking owners of brokerages, we're thinking sales directors, sales managers, we're thinking recruiters, we're thinking trainers, right? All these roles, 99% made up statistic, a large majority are occupied by people who started off as brokers, right? Most of them probably successful brokers, especially the owners of brokerages, right? You're a broker, you made some money, congratulations, start your own brokerage. That's good for you. I'm not hitting on those people, that's what I would do. But the problem is you really have no management or entrepreneurial experience. You're just a good salesperson. So you don't know how to run a company, you don't know how to manage a team, you don't know how to set up operations for an organization, right? And so there's from the get-go, there's a lack of expertise in a lot of those areas. And then they surround themselves with other brokers who want to fill in other roles, right? You've got brokers who want to be trainers because maybe they have different priorities. They have kids, families, they want their weekends back.
Can't sell.
Or they can't sell. I was trying to be nice. But yes, that's also a scenario, right? Recruiters who, there's a few exceptions, but a large majority of them were brokers who then became recruiters, right? You've got brokers who do well and are then promoted to team leaders, sales managers, sales directors. So really you've got a bunch of salespeople trying to run an organization with very little support from people who have experience in other industries and management and training and recruitment and any of these sectors. And so that creates obviously issues. And so obviously I can't come in and fix all those problems for a brokerage, but I try to address some of those things by working with specific targets, right? Like, hey, do you need leadership training for your managers? I'm not trying to get rid of your managers. They're really experienced in real estate. They're the right people, but are you investing into your managers to teach them management and leadership skills, right? Are you training your trainers? Are you allowing them to get certified to understand how to facilitate a training room of people? Are you training your recruiters, right? Are you helping them to become really professional recruiters, understanding that sales funnel, that pipeline of recruitment using that right software and their personal branding, right? And essentially the answer across the board, again, with some exceptions, is that no, they aren't investing in these things. And so that's kind of one of those little gaps that we try to help them solve.
You touched on personal branding there. Do you see that role changing? I see more and more personal branding through social media, and Stephen Leckie was an example of somebody that was on recently, and he said, working for a real estate company, you're mad as an individual broker not to be working on your own personal brand. Would you agree with that? And totally. How do you see it sort of fitting between the company brand and the personal brand?
Yeah, well, I might turn the question back on you. I think you're probably actually better in that sphere than I am as far as actually being a broker and having been there, done that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a massive shift over the last, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years maybe, but really, especially in the last 5 since COVID, to where if you don't have your own personal brand, and this extends beyond real estate, this is just the world of our day, 2025, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't have your own personal brand, no one's going to know about you.
Before it was things like individuals would write books, wouldn't they? They become authors, right. And this sort of thing before the internet became big, and that would massively boost their personal brand and it would give them authority. But today it is so much easier because of LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or the various different options.
Yeah. Well, what have you seen, like with you or even with your brokers, as far as personal branding? Is there one platform that works?
It kind of fits in with what I'm doing, doesn't it? Because I'm with EXP, and it's all about personal branding. So I'm not going to go on about EXP too much, but effectively, I would say the number one agency now in the UK in terms of transactions on a month-by-month basis. Nobody's heard of EXP. It's all about those individual brokers who've got a reputation, possibly because they've done a good job for Connells or Taylors or whatever estate agency they've worked for, real estate agency, and the sellers want to come to them, and then they build up their own personal brand. So yeah, I do see it going more and more that way. And I could even go as far as saying that the property portals are very important in whichever country. So Property Finder and Bayou here. If you've got a good agent who's got their own network, why do they need an agency or a brokerage? Because if they can advertise directly or through an EXP, and there's other options available as well, then they can go direct, can't they, and do their marketing. Right. I think with certain trust with some agencies, and we know the good ones, we touched on Hast House, Axe Capital is very well known as well, that there will be a place for the future and they can provide the training. I see it going more and more towards the individuals directly using the portals.
Right. Interesting. How much, like if you had to think through personal branding with social media versus other ways of personal branding, how much of that is social media and what have you seen work? Like which platforms do you kind of encourage, even like your brokers at EXP or other people that you talk to, which platforms you encourage specifically real estate brokers in Dubai to be active on?
So for somebody such as myself, I'm trying to bring other brokers on into EXP, and for that, definitely LinkedIn. But if you're trying to sell property, LinkedIn not so much. I would say more Instagram, and making sure you've got accounts with the portals as well. Because that's going to generate the leads. But there's other ways of doing personal branding. I've done 1 or 2 presentations as well, and actually meeting people directly or contacting people, having a coffee, that sort of thing. Right. I think face-to-face is good as well.
Yeah. And you can't underestimate the power of like the network and referrals, right? Like so much of personal branding, if you just do a really good job for one client, they're going to bring their network to you, right? Because people trust people.
Absolutely.
So 100%, yeah.
One other thing that I wanted to discuss, how do you see real estate, the legislation going in Dubai? That was an area that was quite interesting.
It's great. We should change nothing. It's perfect.
yeah, I thought you'd say that.
Yeah.
What areas would you like to see changed in terms of legislation, regulation?
Sort of thing? I mean, look, I will start off by saying I think for such a young country, we're doing amazing. And I say we because the UAE has become home. Yeah, I'm not Emirati. I'm waiting for my passport. But I genuinely, it's home. I don't see myself moving anywhere else. I don't have a home to go back to, right? I grew up in France for 15 years, but I have no childhood friends there. I lived in LA for 2 years, Chicago for 4 years, and now I've been here for almost 10. So this is home. I met my wife here. Dubai is between where her family lives in South Africa, where my family lives in Miami or in Geneva, Switzerland. And so Dubai is home. And like seeing where we've come in 10 years and then understanding the history before I was here of where we've come in 50, 53 now, is amazing. And so I think for such a young country, it's easy to kind of hate on the legislation, on the setup, on where we're at as a market. But actually, it's because we're comparing it to industries and legislation bodies that have been around for 100 to 300 years, right? Yeah. So we're doing well. However, that doesn't mean we should be complacent. Dubai as a city is known for being the ever aggressive and changing and improving city. And so I think that should apply to legislation as well. Just because we're doing well doesn't mean we can't do much, much better very soon. Even hopefully 2025.
Particularly as we're so digital today.
Yeah, exactly. So like, for example, I think, people, again, they complain, oh, the Dubai REST app, it's terrible. Form A, Form B, Form F, I get tired of it. Oh, there's always glitches. No, it's the best system in the world for transactions. It's fantastic. Yeah, there's glitches. Yeah, there's little error codes or whatever. Half of those are honestly the fault of unethical agents messing up the system in the first few years of it. It's not even the government's fault. So, I mean, the system is great. But yeah, is there room for improvement and legislation? For sure there is, right? Like we were talking about MLSs earlier. That's not going to happen until some of the legislation changes around even stuff like databases. Like if we can't control databases and cold calling, which agent's going to trust an MLS system for their competitors to have access to their listings? I mean, no one in their right mind, right? So until we can really get a grip on controlling some of that stuff, then it's going to be a mess. And the portals obviously won't let that happen either until there's some control around that.
I totally agree.
So would I love that to change? Would I love an MLS system? Would I love for more transparency in the market? Would I love for all cold calling to go away, for genuine relationships to take over? Totally.
Well, MLS works so well in the US, but that's because of convention, isn't it?
Correct.
It's been like that for literally decades and decades, maybe over 100 years, where it was all just written down. Right. And so you would need legislation to change it here, to change the mindset. Yeah.
The biggest part of legislation, sorry.
I interrupted.
No, you didn't interrupt. My brain came back to it. The biggest part that needs to change, honestly, just yesterday, I took a broker exam. The barrier to entry for brokers in Dubai, brokers, agents, realtors, whatever you want to call them, it's all the same here, which is another issue, is that we don't get our terminology right. But the barrier to entry to get into the market here is so low. It's a 30-question multiple choice test with a 65% passing grade, which means I can get 35 questions wrong, 35% of my questions wrong, and still be licensed. That's crazy, right? On top of that, the questions, honestly, like 10 out of 30 of them were incomprehensible, illegible.
Well, some of them are maths questions, actually.
Which is fine. I'm all about the math.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like you should
but
be
it
able
be
to
a maths
figure
exam,
out. Well, no, there should. Yeah, I mean, maybe the few of like figuring out what the commission should be on a square footage apartment of this amount. But I mean, the questions aren't even English, right? Some of them. And so I think in that way, there's some really easy, big improvement. I think we've actually gone a little bit backwards since pre-COVID days in that way. And it would be so easy to fix it, right? And I've said over and over, like I would happily go into the DLD and help them fix it. It would take a week, right? Like it's not hard to go in there and rewrite the bank of questions and even introduce a very simple, training course, even if it's all online and digital. I've built 2 of them. I can build a third one, right? It's not hard to improve that. And again, if the barrier to entry goes up a little bit and it's more regulated and you can't just go on ChatGPT or phone a friend or literally have someone else log in and take the exam for you, right? I think there's only like 5 people in the UAE that actually pass the exam. Like every brokerage has one person that takes all of them, right? So I think if you could just implement a few things to control that, the barrier to entry would be higher. The bottom like 30 or 40% of brokers that shouldn't be brokers would not be able to transact, and that would solve a lot of the problems.
Yeah.
Sorry, you asked.
No, that's very, very well put. And obviously, you put programs together for these various companies, and I'm sure there was testing there.
Of course.
So that's why you say that you could go in and change it very quickly. Just briefly, what does your wife do? You mentioned
Good question.
her,
Yeah, so we met with Emirates, so that's where she was at the time as well. So we were both flying around the world. Correct. Yeah. So back in we met in 2017 here, flying around the world together. Greatest job in the world for about 6 months, and then it's time to move on.
Great experience.
Yeah, but it was good. She actually enjoyed it. Some people when I think back to when I was crew almost 10 years ago, like serving people chicken and beef, like I couldn't care less if your meal is hot, right? Like it's not me. I care about you kind of, but like you're in a pressurized tube at 40,000 feet. Like just sit there and be happy, right? So obviously that's not exactly what they're looking for over there. But my wife, she enjoyed it. She's like the perfect customer service person. She's a wonderful wife to me. She cares about people, customer service to the extreme. So she was great. She enjoyed it. She loved the traveling. She's from a small rural town in South Africa. about an 8-hour drive from Johannesburg and Cape Town, right in the middle of the country. I'm talking like rhinos and pumbas and meerkats.
Wow.
I'm talking like Africa, right? And so for her, like to come out here and travel the world, that was her childhood dream. And so she actually kept flying for many years. When we got married, I got into real estate. She kept flying. And then just about a year and a half ago, we took the decision that it was time for her to kind of be more present and be around, to have a healthy marriage and her not being gone all the time. So she's now basically helping me full time with Glass Consulting. She's taking care of a lot of the admin side, the back end side, the accounting of it and all that. So it's been super helpful having someone like her kind of help to drive. It's a lot of work. Even when you're alone doing some freelance stuff, it's a lot of work to kind of set up that company.
I can see the way you sort of come in across how much passion you've got for it, and having her involved obviously counts for a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So that's great to see.
Yeah, and having her involved, not only like physically helping with things, but especially like that emotional support that, hey, this is totally something you should do, right? Like you love it, you have a good reputation in the market. It seems like the market needs it, like even more than just us. It probably could use multiple people like us doing what we're doing. So having that support from her is, you can't ask for anything better from a spouse, right?
Excellent.
I saw something the other day. I'm not going to make up statistics, but because I forget, but it was like basically measuring contributing factors to long-term happiness for people. And there were a bunch of them in there. It was like, pay, how much you get paid at work, how your manager is, stuff like that. But then all the way on the right, all the way on the extreme, the highest one by far was happily married.
Yeah.
And so I'm happily married. I have a wonderful spouse. And so we're happy.
That's wonderful to see. We've covered quite a lot there. Any other areas you wanted to discuss?
Look, I would just say, for a little bit of a sales pitch, I would just say if you're a brokerage out there, if you own a brokerage, if you're an agent, if you're a sales director, a sales manager in Dubai, things are going well, the market is healthy, you're selling. I would just say, it's 2025, first quarter. Now is the time to invest, to make sure that if and when, not if, the market slows down, hopefully not crash, but when the market slows down, that you and your team are in a position to keep succeeding, right? And not just riding the wave right now. And so the best way to do that is training, right? And so we've got a bunch of different tools that can help. We've got the Dubai Broker Simulation, which we've built, which is a physical simulation to help brokers kind of train themselves. And that's good for experienced brokers or new brokers. We've got soft skills program, leadership development programs. So, now is the time.
You built that simulator?
Correct. Yeah, I built it from scratch. It's a good
How long
time.
did that take?
About a year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's no small task. Yeah. So it's, obviously the ideation is the hardest part, and coming up with what's going to actually help brokers. And then there's the whole, design and prototype, which blessed my wife, who kind of built a prototype for it, which took her a couple months. And then there's the testing phase to make sure all the kinks are out and it actually works and it's beneficial. And then you've got the design stage and then the creation and printing stage. And so, it's a big project to build something like that. But it's only been on the market for about 2 months now. We've got 4 brokerages who've taken it on and implemented it into their training
4
programs.
already.
Yeah, and the feedback so far is great. I just dropped it off yesterday and did an initial training for Novi, who I've done some work with, and they're doing a really good job down there. And they're super excited about having a product that they can use.
Maybe I can put a link to that in the show notes, in the description, to something that's describing it online.
Yeah, I guess it'll be somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So somewhere there, along with obviously a link to your website and your socials. Well, I haven't seen you in the classroom, but if you come across anything like the way you have done here, then I would imagine you're an excellent trainer.
I appreciate it.
And really enjoyed having you on today, James.
Thanks for having me. I appreciated having a chat, and it was good to meet you face to face and talk all things and hear a bit more about EXP. So I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
Talk soon.